They're like a newsreader.
We are.
Oh yeah.
We are journalists. We're really not. Okay. You ready to start?
Oh, I'm starting.
Well, I
Okay.
can start.
No,
Let me start.
okay. No, I'll start now because now I forgot what the other one is.
Me too.
Hi and welcome. You're listening to Lead Stories podcast, where we believe that everyone has influence.
And those who are intentional with their influence are leaders. We're so glad you're here. I'm Pastor Steph.
And I'm Jo Saxton. Hey,
Hello.
welcome everybody.
Welcome. We are really excited about the series that we're in right now.
Yes.
And you know what? You and I really love this kind of idea of seasons that give you an opportunity for a fresh start and a next step. And
Yeah,
you and I are both into that. And
we are.
I think a lot of our community is, so hopefully you're here with us. And if you're not, maybe that's a good question of why you're not. Well, I mean, just is there, maybe there's been times in your life where you got really excited about like a new season, like the fall or a new year, but now you don't feel that way. That's a good thing to wonder about.
The pastor has spoken.
Wow, I'm coming in strong today. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry about
It's
that.
going to be my line for this series, I feel.
The
I
pastor
feel like
has
the pastor has spoken.
Watch
I
out.
think so. I think it's happening.
Watch out. Well, good. Okay, so why don't you remind everybody of the series we're in?
Mm-hmm. So the series we're in is called Level Up, and we're looking at how you can level up your leadership, recognizing that at certain times of the year that seem to be given to new beginnings, like the start of a year or the start of school year, academic, but that every day is a chance to level up.
Absolutely.
You don't have to wait for a special occasion, but there is a chance that you, whether you're an aspiring leader or an emerging leader or an established leader, can look at what it means to level up your leadership in whatever sphere you're in. So that's what we're looking at.
That's what we're looking at. I'm so excited. And if you missed last week, really want to encourage you to head back there to listen to Joe talk a little bit about those three areas of leadership, aspiring, emerging, and established. And we've got some great show notes and an opportunity for people to kind of process a little bit more about their identity, some of the stories that you tell yourself or have been told to you, and how those may or may not be limiting you from leveling up and taking your leadership to the next level. So today we're going to take on the next topic, which is...
Well, we're looking at, and we kind of have it in two, we kind of had forward slash in the middle of it. Because, anyway.
They feel like they go together.
They do go together. We're looking at your body and your energy. Your body and your energy. Because I am more and more convinced that that is one of the most underestimated, underinvested in aspects of our leadership journey. Wherever we are on the continuum of our leadership journey, that one of the ways that we can level up our leadership is actually to invest in our bodies and to be aware of our energy levels.
Yeah, great. Well, I'd love for you to talk just a little bit about this, because honestly, when you started to coach me years ago now, which was really one of the first times that I felt that there was a connection between my leadership and my body and energy in a very explicit way. And I know it's because you had learned from some of your own experiences.
Yeah.
And so just talk a little bit maybe about how you see these things so integrated.
I mean, I think so often we have limited leadership to a cerebral thing, a thinking thing, or even a gut thing, an emotive thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that those things aren't true and they aren't an integral part of our leadership, but you have one body. And you mess that up, and well, your leadership lives in your body. It's embodied.
Embodied leadership.
And so I think it's in the amounts of times when I have either burnt out or come close to burnout, or not really respected how my body works and how my energy works. Excuse me. That's better. That when I've not acknowledged those things, I've hit a wall. And it has become a limitation. I like to think I was invincible, but I've traded passion and drive, and I have seen those as the driving force of my leadership. Like, for as long as I'm passionate about it, for as long as I've got the get up and go. But what if your get up and go got up and went? Do you know what I mean? What if your passion flamed out? And often it's because of our physical rhythms that those things undermine us, that we start making crazy decisions because we're tired. Because we are at the end of ourselves. And I think...
Don't people say that if you're at a certain level of being tired, it's like you're under the influence of alcohol?
Yeah. I mean, you start acting like you're drunk. Because you are so tired, you don't care anymore about what you're going to say. Or you don't have... your decision-making faculties aren't as sharp as they need to be. And now if we are leading people, families, communities, $1 million budgets, if we are creating art or programming or whatever that is impacting thousands or more, then
or even 10
or one or
one
frankly
person.
one, we want to make sure we didn't mess it up because we didn't get sleep.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think I've realized that. But I think on one level that can take us to the level of, okay, make sure you get a day off once in a while,
right,
or whatever, and that's great.
Right.
But I think there is a great, if we're leveling up on how we attend to our body and our energy, then we want to think big picture and we want to think more intentionally. So for me, as a mother who is working with growing children, you know, the summer often pits itself as this kind of, yay, it's time off and all that kind of stuff, but it's like 15 weeks long, so I am working. So I have to think of, how am I going to manage my energy? How am I going to look after my body? How am I look after my body year round, actually? But how am I attending to those things when my conditions have changed? When my external conditions have changed? I work from home for much of the time. And so when my kids are in my home, what does that mean for my expectations, for time management? What does it mean for time for not just my work, but for the important relationships in my life as well, because they are important relationships in my life. So I think all of those things come under this area of how do we, if we're going to level up our leadership, we do need to level up on how we treat our bodies, because sometimes that might refer to some of the things we talked about last week in terms of identity. As well. And
what stories is your body telling you?
Have you told yourself you're invincible and your body's like, you ain't, sis? Do you know what I mean? You're not. Or is your body trying to tell you it's not?
Right.
And you have been like, but my mind's still here, so I'm going to keep on going. We can sometimes, when it comes to the body and energy, and maybe I don't want to project this on everybody, maybe this is me, but one of the things I've had to learn is to not push through for the short-term win and then undermine the long-term. You know, the long-term strategy of, I want to be leading for years. I want to be leading well all my life. I don't want to just push through and say, I'll crash later, or I'll burn out later, or I'll do all these things, without realizing that the quality of leadership is going downhill all the way there. And so those are some of the things that in my mind make me think this is a hugely important area if we're thinking of leveling up.
Yeah, it's huge. So can I just share a little bit about what that was
please.
like?
Well,
when I started being in a coaching group with you, like I said, that was one of the first times that I felt like someone really pointed out the integration of this, the way that you just described. And it almost like when you said that, it was kind of like, oh my gosh, how have I not thought about this before? I was an athlete in college. I've been someone who needed my body to do what it needed to do from an athletic standpoint for a really long time. By the time I was connecting with you, I was years away from college and frankly years away from using my body athletically. Okay, so that was going on. And it was partly because I had a lot of pain. And being an ice hockey player into my 20s had wreaked havoc on my body. So that was not a lifelong sport. And recognizing that also my early 20s, I was in a role, in a position that did not have very many boundaries on its hours. And so a combination of chronic pain coming from athletics and no clear boundaries about work, and then being a 20-something who wasn't able to put those boundaries up myself as easily as I would be able to now, maybe, was resulting in a very an unsustainable path of how my body and my energy was going to work out. And so what I was realizing was and I know that people can resonate with this, both men and women, of different seasons in your life as far as your age, starting to limit you of what you can do. And that invincible reality starts to hit you more clearly. And so I used to be able to eat this and then still get up in the morning and feel good. I used to be able to stay up until this time and then this and this. I used to be able to get up early, you know, all that stuff. And it was like it was like my life was chiseling off the ability to do that on both ends, kind of, and I was being left with this little. And so I feel like there was it felt almost like a necessity, not just a good idea at that time. Now, I think some of us listening might say, oh, well, you know, I'm not hitting a wall. But I want to encourage people not to hit the wall before they attend to it. But nevertheless, for me, I do think it was a helpful thing for me to hit that wall. I don't think I came like crashing into it, but it was a real reality check for me of it's coming out of my leadership the way you just said. That when I'm in spaces with people, I can do everything I can to try not to allow the pain, the physical pain, for instance, that I'm feeling to exude through the words that I'm speaking to my team. But
and would you say that was some of the impact?
Oh yeah, I think that the people were experiencing that through me, and that maybe they wouldn't have been able to say, oh, I bet Steph is in the mood she's in because of the pain, but that's why. And actually for me, one of my coping mechanisms was to kind of almost create like an adrenaline rush for myself. So actually people would experience me as almost a little bit unusually hyped up, because it was the way,
interesting.
It was really interesting. So it was the way in which my body could overcome the pain, because if you have a lot of adrenaline rushing, kind of that kind of thing, you don't feel as much pain. And so I would enter into leadership spaces, whether it was gatherings or team meetings or whatever, almost with this false sense of being hyped up in order to persevere. But that wasn't a healthy way to lead people either. That adrenaline rush might have covered the pain, but it didn't make me very attuned to what was going on in the room. And then it wasn't sustainable. It's not something that you can do. That's going to mess with your adrenal system, and it did. And so there was just a lot going on. But I can just really attest to the fact that people, your leadership will be embodied by what's going on in your body. And I really felt that acutely. And so it was a long road to recovery in a way. But it included coaching, and really intentional coaching. So that was happening with you. It was also happening with, I ended up getting a trainer that could help me with my injuries. That was huge. And honestly, my conversations with my therapist that I had at the time was hugely helpful, because it wasn't, there was ways in which my physical body and my emotional health was so intertwined at that point that I needed to kind of come at it from all sides to be able to move forward. And there was almost a way I was doing a false dichotomy of my spirit and my body and my soul and my physical, emotional, physical health. And so when I was able to see those so integrated again, it was a real wake-up call. And it took, at least 2 years, I'd say, to get to a spot where I was feeling like I was on level ground again. But it was well worth it to take that intention to say what's going on here. So I had to take a real honest look at what was going on, the rhythms I had, the rhythms I didn't have, the seasons of life. When I'm in a busy season turned into, well, that's all the time. Instead of a busy, because busy seasons are real. But when it's like, a busy season, this is the reason this month, this busy season is right now, and then there'll be another reason, and there was no give or take.
No let up.
So I think that I just really would point back to that time as such a significant aspect of a turning point for me, but one that didn't lead me to saying, I think I can fix this. It led me to saying, I will always need to attend to this.
Isn't that interesting? Because I think this is a really vulnerable area as well. Because you start talking about bodies, and as women, and obviously I think this is, the body thing is, Lead Stories isn't exclusive to women. So, but I know that there is, in many cultures, a double standard on what the body should be.
For women. Yep.
And
most men at this point, I think if you're listening to Lead Stories, like you know that.
We know that's the case. And we're not even saying that that has a solo voice anymore. It's almost like in the air, in the atmosphere. But when we look at things like this, then we could mistakenly only interpret it through weight, or shape, or whatever. And so as we tread on this area and leveling up, it's not about. It's important to say this isn't about diet culture.
No,
this isn't. Isn't. This is one of those things which is so tender that we have to really take the time to work out what is the most appropriate thing for each of us to do. Because for somebody it might be like, I do need to clean up how I'm eating.
Sure.
It's
an intentionality. If we're intentional with our influence and our leadership, what we're saying, and what I think you've been saying for a long time, is then we need to be just as intentional with our bodies.
And I think as I've walked this line, I think I've had to be careful to ask myself, when I'm looking in the mirror and doing this, it's like, okay, you're looking after your body. This isn't about you trying to be skinny.
No.
And no shade to anybody of every body type.
Yeah, right.
Do you know what I mean? That's not the point.
The wrong motivation.
This isn't about trying to be an idea. What I have perceived, or I have perceived others have put on all of us, regardless of our shape, an ideal. A physical ideal. And even in the journey of attending to the leveling up, there have been things to make sure I put down. I'm not trying to do that. When I love running and I love exercise, But that has been a later thing, to be honest. I was athletic in my teens at school. Then I mean, I liked stuff, but I haven't been as intentional as I am now. But I've had to make sure it's not been the idea of I'm going to become so fit, health-wise, I can be even more productive,
right?
And even more stuff, and work even harder and harder and harder, and get up even earlier. And do you know what I mean? I've had to make sure
that's going to hit a wall too.
Yeah, I'm not walking a track of how do I gently carve a path of my own obsessions and my own insecurities when dealing with body and with energy.
Yeah, I think that's really good. So you're kind of mentioning some of these pitfalls. A pitfall in this conversation could easily be, especially for women, the weight thing.
Particularly when you know the world around you isn't fair.
Right, because nobody is the ideal. I mean, no one has ever said, "Oh, I've hit that ideal." Even the people who maybe by some sort of measurement do. Yeah. No one feels that way because it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so I think there's that pitfall, and you're naming the pitfall then of I can just use this as a tool to do what I really want and not rest and not choose, to actually take the space that I need. Yeah. And there's other pitfalls like that. So we're definitely encouraging a sense of you need to think about where you're at and what your next step is to level up when it comes to your body and your energy, because those things are deeply intertwined, and we carry a lot of our emotions in our body. Yeah. In these different parts of where we are at, and when we don't attend to them, that's the problem. So I'll just say, obviously on this podcast, we're both women, so we can only really speak authoritatively as women. But all women are different too. One of the things I noticed in male leaders is almost the opposite. So women we're very consumed by our body image. And I think men struggle with body image sometimes too. But I think that a lot of men want to compartmentalize it even more than we tend to.
It's interesting.
And this kind of wanting to say, I mean, this is why I think we find these men who we say, oh, wow, they were so fit. Why did they have a heart attack? I was just talking to my friend about his dad having a heart attack. Oh, wow. Well, why did that happen at 48? Well, that's scary. Because it wasn't that his physical body wasn't okay. It was emotionally. Wow. And his heart started to have, he was in shape in the measurements of being in shape, could run, could do things with his body. Why was his heart starting to clog? Well, it was really undue stress. And so I think that we see that happen in both genders, but I do want to say, I think there's some things that are just as detrimental for men that they need to pay attention to. And it's not as common for men to even talk about their bodies with other men or what. And so I get that. Women talk about it usually in actually pretty negative ways, but it's not something that goes completely under the radar, where I think for men it can often go completely under the radar.
It's interesting to ask the question, how and where do you carry your stress? Yeah. How do you, and how and where and what carries your stress? Does it, are there numbing exercises that you do? Mm-hmm. I mean, and we won't call them exercises, but it's what are your go-tos? Yeah. And whatever your go-tos are, those are your habits. Those are the exercises you're using to carry your stress. Is alcohol the thing you use to carry your stress? Yeah, food. Is food the thing? Is exercise the thing? Is work the thing you use to carry your stress? And what's the collateral damage? Mm-hmm. And there could be different ways.
I just started thinking about
all the things that we use to carry our stress or to numb the feeling. And I think one of the challenges is the other collateral damage, because is your leadership suffering? Yeah. Are your relationships suffering? Because the stress of your leadership or the stress of work means you have nothing left. Mm-hmm. You genuinely have nothing left when you get home. And so you either don't have any relationships meaningfully, you haven't had time for people and to cultivate them, or the ones that you do have, you want them to understand. Right. You just want them to understand. But then when you finally get round and dragged onto a family vacation, you have nothing left to give. Right.
Except for the little scraps of complete impatience.
and it's worth us acknowledging these things, and we have to audit them because they take time to resolve. Yeah. But again, and on that level, in some ways, I'm talking a bit more on the energy stuff. But again, I remember, and I mentioned this before, but I think it's always a nugget that helps for me. My husband is more introverted. Mm-hmm. Which means he gains his energy. He's not a shy person. No. He recharges on his own.
Yeah, he's outgoing, but he's introverted as far as where he gets his energy.
Yeah, where he gets energy, how he processes. He loves the outdoors. I like the outdoors, but not in the way that he does, and not the same sorts of things. I regenerate by people and conversations and sometimes noise, frankly. Mm-hmm. But when our children were very young. They're teens now, but when they were they're 17 months apart, so we're talking baby preschool age or preschool age. Yeah. One of the things we had to realize is that because we're both working in different kinds of ways because life demanded that we both work. And frankly, bills.
Yeah, right.
But we really had to pay attention to how we did this thing with our energy.
Yeah.
Because he would come home from a full day, and our weekly time of the lights going out have happened. Oh, the recovery was only seconds long.
Did it?
Excuse us, audio friends, the room in which we're in, the lights went out. But
For energy saving purposes.
yeah, for energy saving purposes. But can we make a theme? Anyway, one of the things
it's connected to the concept.
It's in there somewhere. One of the things that we had to do is we looked at our life and thought, okay, you're working all day and people are taking, and you committed to that. It's just that you recharge alone. I'm on my own at that point I was working from home and the kids were at home. So you have this, I've got to work, but the babies thing happening all day and no adult conversation. And so we had to work out how we were going to do certain things.
Yep.
And so in the end, I remember saying to him, I would rather you come home later, even if it was by 45 minutes, if it meant you took some time for you to recharge, dump the day in your mind, go for a coffee,
go to a park,
go to a
whatever you
park,
need to
go hike, do it on the way home, so that you can come home and I can stop. You know what I mean? I can recharge. And it was just it was a little thing that we did, but it made a massive difference to our mutual energy levels. Because and I mean, there were times when I literally would just say, I need to get out for half an hour, and I need to talk to an adult.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Or I need something, or I need to recharge in a particular way. Because even though we were introverts and extroverts, we both needed recharge time, and we both needed time in different ways. We both needed to manage, steward, whatever your chosen word is, our energy in a way that would not deplete us and give us less to give to one another and less to give to our children and less to give to our jobs.
Yeah.
So I think it's when we're thinking of our energy and stuff, it's worth thinking some of those things through.
Yeah.
In terms of how does your job impact your energy levels for the rest of your life?
Yeah.
And what do you need as a result? And to take the time to do that, because if you don't, then all that is left is numbing.
Yep. Yeah.
All that is left is just keeping the wall that you're hurtling towards at bay.
Yeah.
Best you can until it doesn't.
Right. Well, I want us to close in a minute with just a takeaway kind of exercise around some of what we've been talking about. But what I love about the fact that we're having this conversation right now, for not everybody who's listening, but for many people, there will be a shift in a few weeks.
Yeah.
Because there's an academic year, and I know everybody's not necessarily wrapped up in academia, but oftentimes there's a shift because of somebody in your life or ministry life. There's so many reasons.
Or your commute might change.
Your commute might change.
Because all the buses are back out.
Exactly.
I mean, there's all kinds of...
There's
it impacts
a
us.
shift for almost everybody. So what I love about the fact that we're having this conversation now is because there's a big difference between thinking about those rhythms that you need to have of work and rest and exercise and planning for how you want to eat and all those things. There's a difference between talking about that before the shift and talking about that and trying to figure that out once you're already waist
it's heavy.
neck deep
That's hard.
into the shift and the change. It's just a lot harder once it's already been established, because then it usually means going back and saying no to things you already said yes to, or it's just harder.
It's harder work.
So I think for me, when I was initially working through this, it was kind of a tyranny of the urgent, just do whatever I can to try to get this under control. But the maturity and a season that I know I'm approaching in it with maturity is that I'm thinking about it months before or a month before or weeks before the shift happens to say what are going to be my new rhythms. And they might shift and change, based on what ends up happening. But to kind of say at least once a week, I'm going to have this half day to do this. Or I'm planning on these little moments of just having some centering prayer at this time. Or I'm planning on, and here's my ideal week, knowing I'm not going to hit that, but I'm planning on that before I'm in the slew of the schedule change.
Gosh, yeah.
So just want to encourage people to think about that. And, I always say to people, what the best strategy for your own rhythms is the one that works for you. Okay? There's not a perfect one that you and I could have. But if you haven't felt like it's working for you, it might be time to try something new.
It might be trying to shift it up a bit. Something may have shifted.
It might mean that you need somebody who is a little bit more of an accountability partner in it this time around. It might mean actually telling other people you're trying to do this so that they can participate, like your example with your husband. I don't know what it is for people, but taking some time to think about that would be huge.
Yeah, that's good.
So the takeaway I was thinking, we talked about this before we were recording, is, there's a lot of tools we could give. There's a lot of resources, and we encourage you to look into some of the things we've already put out there. But I think just a quick kind of, I think the best word for it would be a mindfulness exercise.
Yeah.
And so as people are listening to this or watching this, if this is not a good time to actually participate in it, you could come back and listen to this later.
Yeah, absolutely.
But let me just give you the instructions and I'll kind of walk people through it. It's just 2 minutes. So find a spot where you can sit, preferably alone, preferably where there's not a lot of noise. It doesn't have to be completely silent. It could even be in your car, like you're saying about your husband, like connecting, getting a minute. So it could be that you before you turn onto your block, you pull over and you just find some space and you just sit where you can have your body just completely at most at rest as possible.
Yeah.
And just lean your head back. You could do this laying down, something like this, and just try to pay attention to what's going on in your physical body. And I know this could seem a little strange if you don't do this often, but we're often wondering about, what do I feel? What do I think? You talked about that cerebral type draw. Nothing wrong with that. But what do I physically feel? Usually I think it helps to start at the tip of your toes and just think about your body moving up to your knees, up to your waist, to your abdomen, to your shoulders, that's the spot, your arms, your hands, all the way to the top of your head. You might need to go a few times, just an audit. Where do you feel tension? Where do you feel pain? Where do you feel energy? Where do you feel any sort of sensation whatsoever? If you do something like that, and you begin to audit where you're feeling some of these things, it's the beginning of a physical intelligence. Like you have an awareness of your physical self. So then that practice is one that you can take into other spaces where you're in a tense moment at work. You're in an argument with your spouse or your roommate. You're in a moment of joy. What are you feeling? Because if we can't answer that question, a lot of this is not going to work.
Yeah.
And so it's just this practice of doing that. So you can just, listen to the instructions, then turn it off and just do that. I often find that it's helpful to go from my toes all the way through my extremities to the top of my head and then back down again.
That's good.
Paying attention.
It's amazing because I think it's been a long time for many of us since we've actually paid attention to what our bodies are doing.
And what might it be telling you? Is are our bodies saying something? They may be saying, I need rest. They may be saying, I need help. They may be saying, I'm ready to do something new. I want to take that step. Maybe it's almost like this, ready to run and ready to go. I don't know what it is for everybody's body, but I need to be able to answer that for mine.
That's good.
And begin to answer that. And you might have to do that for a few days in a row before you begin to really, because it's a muscle that we don't use very often, of an awareness. I think of our awareness as similar to a physical muscle. When you don't use it often, it gets kind of weak.
That's good.
And so if we've been almost trying to keep ourselves from understanding where we're at in our physical body, it's not gonna be going well. So that's the practice I want to offer as a takeaway.
That's
I
great.
think that it could be really.
That's a really good takeaway. Well, friends,
this has been good.
This has been good.
I'm excited about this. We have a couple more at least.
Yeah.
At least one more, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Level up your leadership.
It matters, friends. It matters.
It matters, and and I think at the end of the day, there is a lot of motivation that we can have for why we want to level up our leadership, and recognizing that it affects other people is a really important motivation to pay attention to. It's not maybe the only one, but there's a real reality that what God wants to do in and through us is going to be impacted by whether or not we pay attention to this stuff. And it's not just about us, This isn't about level up your leadership so that you can feel good about yourself.
We hope you will.
Yes,
but we hope you will.
That's not the end game. That's a means to the end.
Yeah, that's a lovely part of it too.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Let's do this.
All right, everybody.
Until next time.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
We still need some information from you on things you'd like us to talk about in this little hot minute.
Yeah.
So
we'll wait for let's do a few weeks where we just get people's
so we can
feedback.
gather them all up. So looking forward to it.
Hi. Bye.
Bye.